Evergreen Park was a small suburban enclave nestled between gently rolling hills and a winding creek. Named for the towering pine trees that dotted its borders, the development comprised neat streets, cheerful single-family homes, and a handful of shared amenities. A modest community pool, a playground with swings, and one beloved public basketball hoop near a pocket park. Families found Evergreen Park a safe haven, enjoying well-maintained sidewalks for strolling with pets or kids in strollers. Like many such developments, Evergreen Park had a homeowners association, officially tasked with keeping common areas maintained and property values high. The HOA sometimes intruded into residents' daily lives. Most folks tolerated the oversight in exchange for the well-kept ambience. Yet behind that polite exterior, rumblings of discontent occasionally arose, especially when one particular board member decided to enforce rules with iron-fisted fervor. Her name was Caroline Dundee, but the rest of the neighborhood knew her by a nickname whispered behind closed doors: Karen. Caroline was a middle-aged woman with a perpetual scowl and a knack for zeroing in on any perceived infractions, no matter how small. Holiday lights lingering past the official removal date, Caroline would deliver an admonishing email. A mailbox that wasn't precisely 42 inches high, Caroline threatened fines. She had assumed an outsized role in the HOA, practically turning minor neighborly squabbles into full-blown violations of community standards. For years, Caroline's influence went mostly unchallenged. Neighbors found it easier to comply with her demands or quietly ignore her. But all that was about to change, sparked by an unlikely catalyst: the sound of bouncing basketballs near the local park. At the heart of Evergreen Park, just off Mapleview Drive, lay a small pocket park. It featured a few benches, neatly trimmed grass, and, off to one side, a solitary basketball hoop where local kids and teens gathered after school. The hoop was no deluxe sports complex, just a sturdy backboard, net, and a painted half-court on the asphalt. Yet it was enough to draw youngsters looking for friendly pickup games or an after-dinner shooting session. Parents appreciated having a safe place for their children to burn energy. The rhythmic dribble of a basketball, accompanied by laughter or the quick squeak of sneakers, was a comforting backdrop to late afternoons. Even older residents sometimes ambled by, reminiscing about their own youth, happy to see kids active in the fresh air. For the most part, the hoop operated on a simple, unspoken system. Kids brought their own basketballs. Sometimes they left them lying near the court if they ran home for a snack, or set them on a bench while resting. Rarely did anyone worry about theft. Evergreen Park prided itself on being a close-knit, trustworthy community. Caroline Dundee, however, despised the thumping. To her ears, each bounce on the pavement was an assault on the neighborhood's tranquility. She lived in a corner house about a block from the park, close enough to hear the occasional game, though distant enough that most neighbors never considered the noise intrusive. Yet to Caroline, the sound was intolerable, a daily reminder of disrespectful teenagers or unruly children who dared to enjoy themselves too openly. She began quietly muttering about noise pollution, telling anyone who'd listened that constant basketball dribbling violated some half-remembered city ordinance. Most neighbors brushed her off, but Caroline wasn't the type to let it go. That bouncing ball was about to trigger her most brazen act yet. In typical fashion, Caroline launched her campaign by emailing the HOA board. She wrote, in part, "Subject: Urgent noise infraction, basketball court. Dear HOA members, I am writing with grave concern over the incessant noise created by the basketball court in Evergreen Park. The dribbling and shouting continue well into the afternoon and early evening, disturbing the peace. I believe we must act to restrict or ban basketball activity that violates noise thresholds. Sincerely, Caroline Dundee, HOA board member." She cited obscure local statutes about decibel levels, though her references were tangential at best. Those laws typically applied to construction sites or late-night parties, not kids playing at 5 p.m. The other board members responded politely, noting that no one else had complained. They pointed out the park was a designated recreational area, so typical sporting noise fell within normal use. Caroline fumed. She tried gathering signatures from neighbors, but few agreed with her. Parents, in particular, defended the court as a healthy outlet for children. One father, John Reeves, insisted it kept teens out of trouble. Another mother, Marisol Diaz, said it helped her kids exercise. Caroline found herself stymied. The ball kept bouncing. She grew more irate. Soon, she escalated by cornering kids at the court, demanding they keep noise to a minimum. Teenagers rolled their eyes, sometimes ignoring her or giving sarcastic retorts. Younger children found her intimidating. Some left early when she glared at them from across the street. Yet the games continued, aided by an unofficial rotation of basketballs that kids shared. Quietly, Caroline plotted a more direct approach. If words and email campaigns weren't enough, she'd remove the nuisance at its source, the basketballs themselves. On a sunny Friday afternoon, a group of middle schoolers finished a pickup game at the park. They placed their basketball on a bench and ran to a nearby friend's house for popsicles, intending to return and resume playing. But when they came back half an hour later, the ball was gone. They looked around, perplexed. Maybe someone borrowed it. A boy mused, scanning the area. No neighbors were around to ask. It might have been dismissed as a fluke. Perhaps another kid moved the ball or took it by mistake. But over the following days, it happened again and again. Balls left briefly unattended vanished without explanation. The pattern was unmistakable. By midweek, at least half a dozen residents reported missing basketballs. An uneasy tension spread among the kids. Evergreen Park had never been known for theft. Could an outsider be snooping around, stealing sports gear? Parents grew concerned, telling children not to leave their balls behind, but it was normal for them to set them aside for a few minutes. The community grapevine buzzed with speculation. Some whispered that maybe Caroline Dundee was involved, given her vocal hatred of the dribbling. But no one had concrete proof. Caroline kept a low profile, though neighbors noticed her faint smirk whenever they discussed the missing basketballs. It was the sort of look that hinted at secret satisfaction. She carried on with her usual routine, lecturing about lawns or issuing warnings about trash bins. But behind her tidy facade lay a locked garage, one that, unbeknownst to the neighborhood, now held an assortment of confiscated basketballs. One evening, as the sun dipped below the pines, a father named Ethan Campbell walked his dog around the block. He heard a dull thump from inside a closed garage door, Caroline's garage. Curious, he paused, thinking it might be the echo of a bouncing ball. But the sound stopped abruptly. He shook his head and continued. However, the next morning, Ethan walked by the same spot and noticed a slight gap under Caroline's garage door. Peering in, he glimpsed what looked like a bright orange sphere, partly obscured by storage boxes. Could it be a basketball? He recalled the rash of stolen balls. A chill ran through him. Could Caroline have taken them? He discreetly snapped a photo of the partial ball visible through the gap. Then he told his wife, who alerted some of the other parents. Word spread like wildfire. Caroline Dundee might be hoarding basketballs in her garage. The rumor alone inflamed parents whose kids had lost beloved sports gear. Some neighbors argued they needed direct proof. Others wanted to confront Caroline immediately. A few considered calling the police, but cooler heads prevailed, noting they only had a single photo of something that might be a ball. They decided to watch carefully for more signs. Meanwhile, children continued playing with the few basketballs left. That is, until those, too, began to vanish if left unattended for even a moment. Caroline's brazen behavior escalated. She would lurk behind hedges, waiting for a child to step away from the bench. Then she'd swoop in, pick up the ball, and scurry back to her garage. Her logic was twisted. If no one had a ball, the court would be silent, problem solved. She never considered the fury she was stoking among residents. She believed she was simply restoring peace. One afternoon, a high school student named Joshua Green decided he'd had enough. He and his friends had lost 2 basketballs that week. They suspected Caroline but lacked concrete evidence. So Joshua devised a plan. He'd place his basketball conspicuously near the court, then hide nearby with his phone camera ready. He waited behind a large oak tree, sweat beading on his brow in the summer heat. His phone camera was open, finger hovering over the button. After about 15 minutes of tense waiting, he saw a figure approach. Sure enough, it was Caroline Dundee, glancing around furtively. She picked up the ball, tucked it under her arm, and hurried off across the street toward her home. Joshua snapped several photos, capturing her face clearly and the ball in her possession. Heart pounding, he emerged from his hiding spot, calling out, "Hey, that's my ball." Caroline froze for a second, then rushed into her garage, slamming the door behind her. Joshua recorded everything. Breathless with excitement and indignation, Joshua texted the footage to his friends and to Mr. Campbell, who quickly showed it to other parents. They finally had undeniable evidence. Caroline was stealing basketballs. A wave of outrage rippled through the neighborhood. People demanded immediate action. Many felt a sense of betrayal. Had Caroline really stooped so low? That evening, a small crowd of parents and teens formed outside Caroline's house. Ethan Campbell led them. They didn't come with torches and pitchforks, but their anger was palpable. They wanted their children's property returned, along with an explanation and an apology. Caroline, peeking from behind her curtain, felt a jolt of fear. She braced herself, heart pounding. But her indignation flared just as quickly. How dare they mob me, she thought. Yet she knew the jig was up. The doorbell rang repeatedly. Gathering her nerve, Caroline opened the door, stepping onto the porch with forced composure. Ethan Campbell spoke first. Caroline, we have photographic evidence you've been taking basketballs from the park. We want them back, now. He gestured at the crowd. These belong to our kids. Hand them over. Caroline pressed her lips into a thin line. Those balls were left unattended, she said coldly. They were causing a public disturbance. I'm preventing an illegal noise nuisance. They shouldn't have been left lying around. Her logic sounded absurd to the gathered parents. A mother retorted. They were on public property, near the community court. That's what kids do. Take breaks, set the ball down. You have no right to lock them away. Caroline folded her arms. The HOA rules say items can't be abandoned in communal areas. I merely confiscated them to enforce that rule. She tried to maintain an air of authority, ignoring the furious stares. Joshua Green chimed in. I caught you on video. You're stealing. That's a crime. He held up his phone. Caroline's face flushed. She realized any moral high ground she'd invented was crumbling. Well, if you want them, wait here, she muttered. She stomped into the garage, returning with a wheelbarrow half filled with basketballs, at least a dozen. Some were scuffed or had kids' names scrawled across them. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People recognized their property. She tipped the balls onto the driveway, as if discarding unwanted trash. There, take them, she snapped. Unbelievable, a father growled. Another mother retrieved her son's ball, hugging it protectively as if it were a rescued pet. They shot daggers at Caroline with their eyes, a wave of condemnation that left her trembling with a mix of anger and embarrassment. Within the hour, news of Caroline's theft spread throughout Evergreen Park via text chains and social media groups. People were appalled that an HOA board member would commit outright theft from children. Even those who'd once supported Caroline's strict enforcement of rules felt betrayed. Furious parents demanded swift action. Several threatened to file a police report. Others insisted on an emergency HOA meeting to address Caroline's misconduct. The next morning, a flurry of emails flew among board members, with everyone from the president to the treasurer expressing shock. Caroline, for her part, tried to justify her actions, emailing the board. Subject: mitigating a noise disturbance. Dear HOA colleagues, I only confiscated the basketballs because they were causing a relentless cacophony. The owners left them lying around, in violation of the No Abandoned Items clause. I intended to return them eventually, once the kids learned responsibility. Please understand my motives were pure. Sincerely, Caroline Dundee, HOA board member. The board responded with a curt message asking her to refrain from unilateral actions and referencing possible disciplinary measures. Caroline realized that her authority within the HOA was in jeopardy. Her cunning plan to eliminate the dribbling nuisance had backfired spectacularly. Meanwhile, anger simmered in the community. People demanded an official apology, some calling for Caroline's resignation from the board. The single basketball hoop had become a symbol of children's right to play, overshadowing any concern about minor noise. The entire fiasco seemed poised to reshape how the HOA handled common spaces and activities. In the days following the confrontation, a group of parents convened in a neighbor's living room to discuss next steps. They included Ethan Campbell, Joshua Green's mother, several other mothers and fathers whose children played basketball, and even a few older teens. One father, Mr. Bailey, proposed a bold measure. Let's show that we fully endorse the basketball court. We'll buy more basketballs, Keep them at the park in a secure rack so kids can always play. Another mother, Lisa Chun, added, "Yes, we can design a locked cabinet or a coded bin. That way, no one can just whisk the balls away." People nodded with enthusiasm. They envisioned a user-friendly system, a small, weatherproof storage rack near the hoop, accessible by a combination known to families in the neighborhood. Kids wouldn't have to worry about leaving personal balls unattended. If Caroline tried to remove them again, it would be blatant theft from communal property. The idea gained traction rapidly. They collected donations to purchase equipment, an upright metal rack, a padlock with a combination, and brand new basketballs from a local sporting goods store. Some neighbors pitched in money, others donated time or tools. Even some who weren't directly impacted recognized this as a stand against arbitrary HOA tyranny. In parallel, a few parents openly discussed pressing charges against Caroline. But after retrieving their property, many felt it might be more effective to push the HOA board to impose consequences. Publicly dragging the community into court would cause tension, and most residents preferred a more constructive resolution. That said, the threat of legal action loomed, ensuring Caroline couldn't simply brush this off. On a crisp Saturday morning, a small crew gathered at the pocket park. They carried the newly purchased rack, a drill, and some metal bolts. With permission from the HOA president, who was livid at Caroline's actions but wanted to preserve a semblance of procedural order, they found a suitable spot near the hoop's paved area. The sun shone bright as parents and teens worked together, marking holes, drilling into the concrete base, and securing the rack upright. An older teen helped label each slot for a basketball, while a father tested the padlock mechanism. "This code is easy enough for kids to memorize," he said. "We'll share it among families. That way, if you need a ball, you just punch in the code, open the rack, and grab one." The final step was stocking the rack with fresh, brand-name basketballs purchased via donations. Each ball bore a small tag or sticker reading, "Property of Evergreen Park, for community use only." A sense of accomplishment flowed through the group. They had turned adversity into a solution, ensuring Caroline's sabotage wouldn't happen again. Children started arriving almost immediately. Word had spread that new basketballs were free to use. Soon, laughter and the familiar bounce of dribbling echoed across the park. Parents beamed with pride, snapping photos. The scene felt like a collective victory, a direct rebuttal to Caroline's negativity. By the following week, the new ball rack became the talk of the neighborhood. People admired the design, sturdy, well-labeled, accessible. Kids joyfully came and went, punching in the code, retrieving a ball, then returning it when done. The system functioned flawlessly, a testament to community collaboration. Caroline Dundee, meanwhile, found herself increasingly isolated. She still walked her dog around the block, but neighbors no longer greeted her warmly. Some openly muttered or gave her cold stares. Others feigned busyness to avoid conversation. Even at the next HOA board gathering, her longtime allies distanced themselves, unwilling to defend blatant theft from children. At that meeting, the board officially censured Caroline for acting unilaterally, violating the trust of residents. They demanded she refrain from further confiscations and threatened removal from the board if she repeated such stunts. Caroline seethed, feeling cornered. She insisted her intentions were misunderstood. She merely sought quiet, not to be seen as a criminal. But no one was buying that argument. When local news of the neighborhood basketball thief filtered to an area blog, Caroline faced further embarrassment. Though she wasn't named, many recognized the story. The once powerful HOA figure now carried the stigma of having locked children's basketballs in her garage. A wave of sympathy for the kids overshadowed any faint concerns about noise. With Caroline discredited, the HOA found an opportunity to revisit and clarify some ambiguous rules. They drafted new guidelines explicitly allowing sports equipment in common areas, provided it didn't block walkways or become hazardous. Leaving a ball on a bench for a short break does not constitute abandonment, read one clause, a direct counter to Caroline's earlier justification. They also established procedures for addressing noise complaints more fairly, setting specific quiet hours, e.g., no dribbling after 9 p.m., which most parents accepted as reasonable. Outside those hours, normal recreational noise at the park was acknowledged as healthy and permissible. Additionally, The board resolved to create an official Kids Advisory Committee to ensure the younger generation had a voice. This was an unprecedented move, sparked by the fiasco. Two teens, including Joshua Green, were invited to share ideas for improving the park. Suddenly, the youth, once trivialized by Caroline, found themselves at the center of positive change. Caroline voted against these measures, calling them excessive pandering. But outnumbered, she could only watch as the board adopted them. Residents praised the changes as a step toward a more inclusive, family-friendly environment. Meanwhile, the pocket park thrived with renewed enthusiasm. The coated ball rack remained stocked, the hoop frequently in use, children's laughter echoing each afternoon. Summer arrived, bringing longer daylight hours and warm evenings. The basketball court became a magnet for kids and teens seeking casual pickup games. At times, parents joined in, forging intergenerational matches. On weekends, older siblings or even college students passing through town would stop by, drawn by the open, welcoming vibe. The ball rack's success was undeniable. No more missing basketballs or confusion about whose belonged to whom. The simple code-based access worked flawlessly. A rotating group of volunteers, mostly parents, checked the rack weekly, ensuring the balls were in good shape, airing them up if needed. Donations covered any replacements. With the acceptance of healthy, sporting noise, the neighborhood's attitude shifted. People realized the sound of kids playing was not some dreaded nuisance, but a sign of vitality. Often, those living closest to the park said it never bothered them. Even older folks, once indifferent to basketball, found themselves cheering on local kids. Some mentioned how the dribbling had become a comforting background rhythm, a symbol of a thriving community. Caroline Dundee, however, stewed on the sidelines. She avoided eye contact if she happened to walk near the park. The once lingering tension from her confiscation spree lingered in subtle glances or hushed remarks. She attended HOA meetings but kept her criticisms subdued, wary of sparking renewed backlash. A few times, she attempted mild sabotage, like lodging a complaint about scattered litter near the court, but volunteers quickly cleaned it up, thwarting her efforts. In the midst of this renewed basketball fervor, a 12-year-old named Zoe Ramirez discovered her passion for the sport. Before the ball rack's installation, she'd rarely played. Her family didn't own a basketball, and she was shy about borrowing one. Now, with easy access to the communal balls, she practiced daily, working on dribbling drills, jump shots, and layups. Zoe's mother noticed her daughter's excitement and enrolled her in a local youth basketball camp. After a few weeks, Zoe's skills blossomed. She returned each afternoon to the neighborhood court, bounding with energy, eager to show new moves to friends. Neighbors took note of her determination, occasionally cheering or offering tips. Zoe dreamed of joining a school team. The hoop in Evergreen Park, once overshadowed by controversies, had become a stepping stone toward that aspiration. Caroline occasionally passed by, lips thinning at the sight of Zoe's persistent dribbling. But the child's unwavering focus and kind spirit melted even some of Caroline's bitterness, though she'd never admit it. On a few occasions, Zoe even waved cheerfully at Caroline. Surprised, Caroline managed a stiff nod, unsettled by a gesture of goodwill from a child she'd once tried to silence. The entire community followed Zoe's progress, reflecting on how an open, shared resource could spark a youngster's passion. Stories like Zoe's deepened residents' conviction that the court and its communal basketball supply were valuable. If anything, it proved that Caroline's attempt to stifle the thumping had inadvertently nurtured new talent and new connections among neighbors. Just when the tension seemed to dissipate, rumors floated that Caroline was plotting a new scheme. A neighbor reported seeing her rummage through old municipal codes at the local library. Another said she overheard Caroline talking about zoning restrictions that might prevent permanent racks in certain areas. People worried she might attempt to remove the ball rack on a technicality. Indeed, Caroline started whispering about how the metal rack was an unauthorized structure on HOA property, claiming the board needed a formal permit. She threatened to bring it up at the next meeting, hoping to get it dismantled. Some parents fretted that she might succeed, given her penchant for legalistic nitpicking. But this time, the HOA board was prepared. They'd documented the rack's installation thoroughly, with approval from the board president. They had receipts for the materials, a record of how community donations funded it, and a clear statement that it was an HOA-sanctioned amenity. They'd even posted a small plaque reading, officially approved by Evergreen Park HOA, for neighborhood use. Caroline's argument of it being an unauthorized structure would fall flat. Anticipating her move, the board preemptively placed the ball rack status on the agenda, inviting open discussion. Parents lined up to defend it, eager to highlight its success. The board also had a lawyer friend briefly check if any city zoning ordinance might conflict with a small storage rack. None existed. Caroline realized she was outmaneuvered. She attended the meeting but left early, frustrated. The proposed motion to remove the rack never even made it to a vote. With Caroline's second strike thwarted, the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. No further sabotage attempts emerged. Kids continued playing basketball, the coated rack remained fully functional, and no legal challenge materialized. It appeared Caroline's power was waning. Her membership on the board persisted, but her influence diminished each time she overreached. Residents openly discussed the fiasco with a sense of humor, joking about Karen's basketball heist. Someone created a light-hearted graphic for the community's Facebook page, depicting cartoon basketballs happily bouncing away from a scowling figure. The memory of stolen balls, once a source of anger, had transformed into a cautionary tale and an inside joke. Don't leave your ball with Karen. Some began musing about the next HOA election, pondering if Caroline might be voted out. Others debated whether she'd resign on her own, feeling humiliated. For now, she remained, possibly to maintain some shred of control or simply because she refused to yield. But her reign of intimidation was effectively over. Meanwhile, new families moving into Evergreen Park heard the story of how the community overcame one board member's extremes by uniting. The basketball hoop, once a modest fixture, had become a proud emblem of neighborhood solidarity. Even residents uninterested in sports felt proud of how they'd stood together, ensuring children had free, safe recreation. One late afternoon, Zoe Ramirez was practicing free throws. The sun cast long shadows across the pavement, painting the court in warm hues. Suddenly, she noticed Caroline Dundee standing by the fence, watching quietly. Zoe tensed, expecting a lecture or a complaint. Instead, Caroline approached hesitantly. "You're pretty good," Caroline remarked, her tone subdued. Zoe blinked, surprised by the praise. She offered a small smile. "Thanks. I've been practicing a lot." An awkward silence followed. Then Caroline sighed. "I realized that I might have been too harsh about the basketball situation. I didn't mean, well, I just wanted peace. But maybe I went about it the wrong way." She hesitated, as if forcing the words out. "I see you enjoy this, so keep it up." Zoe nodded, uncertain how to respond to this rare humility. "Thanks, Ms. Dundee. I guess we all just want to do something we love." Caroline shifted uncomfortably, then turned to go. It wasn't an outright apology for the theft or the drama, but it was the closest she'd come to an admission of fault. Zoe watched her leave, a mixture of relief and empathy stirring in her chest. Perhaps Caroline had realized she wouldn't win the war on dribbling and decided it was time to yield. In the days after that brief exchange, Caroline avoided direct conflict, though she didn't exactly become a champion of the basketball court. Still, glimpses of reluctant tolerance peeked through. A handful of neighbors took it as a sign that even the most stubborn among them could be swayed, at least a little, by genuine community spirit. As the summer winded down, several parents organized an end-of-season basketball tournament for the kids, capitalizing on the excitement around the hoop. They invited all ages, a bracket for younger children, a bracket for older teens, and even a friendly parents versus teens exhibition match. On the weekend of the tournament, the pocket park bustled with energy. A folding table offered cold water and snacks. Folding chairs lined the court's edge. Neighbors chatted, rooting for their favorite teams. Kids dashed across the pavement, the air filled with squeals and clapping. Every so often, someone used the code to grab a fresh ball from the rack if one bounced astray. Zoe Ramirez played in the older kids bracket, showcasing her refined skills. Joshua Green, the teen who'd caught Caroline on video, was also there, sinking three-pointers. Younger children cheered them on, itching for their turn on the court. The final game pitted a mix of high schoolers against an impromptu team of parents, who put up a surprising fight before losing to youthful stamina. Throughout the day, not a single complaint was heard about noise. Even residents who once grumbled about the sound of dribbling found themselves clapping along, enjoying the sense of unity. It stood in stark contrast to the bleak days of stolen basketballs and confrontation. Caroline Dundee was spotted at a distance, leaning on a fence post, arms folded. She didn't participate or cheer, but she also didn't disrupt the fun. A few neighbors gave her polite nods, perhaps acknowledging that while she'd caused trouble, she hadn't tried shutting down the event. The tournament ended with smiles, medals for the kids, and a reaffirmation that the court, and the new ball rack, was here to stay. The next HOA meeting saw a record turnout, with residents eager to reflect on the basketball saga. At the start of the session, the board president, Ms. Wilcox, announced a new motion, a formal resolution to support recreational amenities in Evergreen Park. The resolution recognized the importance of shared spaces like the basketball hoop, praised the community ball rack initiative, and commended the volunteer efforts that kept it running smoothly. Neighbors cheered as Ms. Wilcox read the text. Be it resolved that Evergreen Park encourages lawful, positive use of communal facilities, including the basketball court. The HOA will not tolerate unauthorized confiscation of personal or communal property. We uphold the right of our youth to engage in healthy sports and will foster an environment conducive to their development. It was a thinly veiled rebuttal to Caroline's previous actions. She sat sullenly in her seat, arms crossed, while everyone else applauded. The resolution passed unanimously. Caroline abstained, refusing to support it, but lacking the votes to block it. Afterward, Ms. Wilcox singled out Ethan Campbell, Joshua Green, and others who spearheaded the ball rack project. She praised them for exemplifying community spirit. Applause thundered through the room, with many turning to glare at Caroline, who avoided eye contact. She realized she'd lost not just the moral high ground, but also any credibility as a champion of order. The resolution hammered home that her meddling was out of step with the neighborhood's values. In the weeks and months that followed, life in Evergreen Park continued on a steadier path. The Pocket Park's basketball court remained a lively gathering spot. The coated ball rack stood as a testament to the neighborhood's resilience, always stocked with a few well-worn but cherished basketballs. Children played confidently, no longer worried about some adult snatching their gear. Parents conversed on the benches, forging friendships beyond their immediate circle. Teens like Joshua Green carried a sense of pride for having defended their right to recreational space. Younger kids, like Zoe Ramirez, blossomed in skill and confidence, already eyeing tryouts for school teams. As for Caroline Dundee, Karen, she remained in the neighborhood. She still occasionally grumbled about minor issues, but her authority on the HOA board waned. A quiet rumor circulated that she might not seek re-election in the next cycle, given how thoroughly she'd been rebuked. Some neighbors pitied her, seeing a lonely figure who tried to impose control where it wasn't wanted. Others felt no sympathy, recalling the heartbreak on kids' faces when their balls were stolen. Yet, ironically, Caroline's brazen act had spurred a more robust sense of unity within Evergreen Park. By attempting to eliminate the constant thumping, she ignited a collective defense of children's play. The community's stand produced a lasting solution, secure basketball storage, and reaffirmed that neighborhoods thrive when they nurture, rather than stifle, the next generation's energy. On a cool autumn evening, as leaves turned gold and red, a group of children played a final game before dusk. The bounce of the ball echoed through the crisp air. No one worried about stepping away for a snack or water break. The coated rack meant safety, and no Karen could whisk their ball away again. In that moment, the simple joy of dribbling on asphalt symbolized a deeper truth. A strong community, standing together, can defeat even the most stubborn attempts to silence its heartbeat.